Hey, everybody, and welcome to Spill the Novel Tea, where three girlies shout into the void about our latest book hot takes and obsessions. I'm Abby.
I'm Maddie.
And I'm Kaylee.
This week we're talking about Masters of Death by Olivia Blake. A quick heads up, this book honestly wasn't our fave. We hate to say it, especially for Kaylee, and we supported her in DNFing. But we still want to talk about all the weirdness of the little creatures and of this story. So bear with us, but here's the tea. So right out the gate, we start with our maybe main character. We have a few main characters really, but Fox Demora. So he is the adopted mortal godson of Death, capital D, Death, the character. And I know that is a lot to take in, but bear with us. Fox has basically grown up around immortals all of his life, and his mortality is always kind of framed as this giant weakness. So he's really insecure about it, not very trustworthy, and yeah, I think for me he was immediately unlikable. But I understand that that's kind of the point. So, um, if you haven't read this book, one of the first scenes, he basically, because he pretends to be a medium who can convene with Death, which of course he does have a close relationship with the character Death, but he's not quite a medium. So anyway, he like takes advantage of people through doing this. That's his business. But you understand too that like he is a schemer, he's untrustworthy, and he's meant to be unlikable. So like I do get that. But honestly, besides that, and kind of a theme that you'll see throughout the book, I think for us, is that I didn't really care after a certain point. I understood that he wasn't meant to be likable, but I also just wasn't very interested in him after a certain point. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Fox personally.
Yeah, I feel very similarly. And I think this is the trick with like having an unlikable main character on purpose is like your reader doesn't like him. So like I didn't care about like his feelings, wants, or needs because he immediately gave me the ick right off the bat by taking advantage of his clients who are in like this vulnerable emotional state. So it's like, okay, I recognize that that was done in purpose or on purpose, very intentionally. However, the result is I don't want to hear more about Fox. Like I don't like him, and I don't really think he has like a redemption arc in the book, really. Like, you know, he doesn't really undergo like some massive transformation that I buy into or anything like that. So he's just very, you know, I respect that he's just earnestly selfish. Like he's not afraid to say like his motivations are he's in it for him, and like I can respect that. And I think it resulted in like some funny scenes like later on when he's kind of getting the pitch to like, we need you to save the world. At first he's like, no, I just straight up don't want to do that. And they're like, why? And he's like, because I don't want to. Like I would rather go home. And so like I did think that was funny, but you know, it doesn't last long enough. I almost feel like it wasn't pushed far enough into like the kind of like unwilling hero trope, because then they're like, no, we need you to save the world. And he's like, well, why didn't you just say that? Okay, I'll go. And so I don't know. I think some of the direction, like I get it and I see where it was going, but I almost feel like then there was like this struggle to make him likable, and I'm like, no, he's unlikable. Like just lean into that if that's what you're going to lean into.
I agree. Okay, so he's part of the reason I DNF. Like, it's a risk that authors take sometimes, but it's a risk to create characters that are so unlikable. And I feel like by taking that risk as an author, you have to accept, especially with your main character, you have to accept that some people aren't going to want to keep reading. Like, where's the motivation to keep reading if you don't like the characters? If you're more of a character-based reader, which typically I'm not, but this is a very character-driven story. So it was a little bit different for me in this case. Like there was no plot early on, so I had to rely on like whether I liked the characters or not to keep reading, and I just didn't. I did not. And he gave me the ick too. So I had major ick.
Yeah. Well, I think too, this book kind of struggles. Like there's certain things that it kind of struggles with, and along with like an unlikable character from jump, which yeah, you have to do a lot of work to then make plot or something compelling to keep people going. But I think Olivia's writing style is just pretty dense at times or just very like verbose. So you have this kind of unlikable character. You don't have a big plot point coming up yet. You have some pretty like hefty dialogue and stuff to get through. So it's just not, you have to really be propelled. And I will say, okay, one thing I did like about this book is again the concept was very very fun. Like I love anything that has like all these different types of creatures and stuff. I think some of the things we'll get into with like the other characters being in real estate and there's a ghost that's like haunting the house she's trying to sell. Like there are some funny things here. Genuinely, there are good like nuggets of little like concepts and things, but you have to do. There was too much bogging it down from the beginning. So like yeah, we didn't blame. We were like, yeah, Kaylee, we support you, girl, because there's just a lot of in that beginning. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, too, to the point of like how it's written, it is so character driven and it's so dialogue heavy as well. And one thing that I loved and hated about the dialogue is that it really sounds like a real life conversation that would be happening if everyone was like in a Discord call together, right? Because everyone's talking over everyone. There's like 3 conversations happening. And so like I appreciated the chaoticness that like it felt true to like if you put 10 people in a room that all have unique like motivations and stuff together, this is what it would sound like. But as a reader, it also kind of made some of those scenes like really unbearable to try and get through and like keep sorted. And but I know there are readers that like will love that piece of it and like won't have an issue with it, but there are so many times where I was like, Isis, I don't need you to fucking chime in right now. Like I'm focusing so hard on trying to keep up on like what is going on. Like I do not need the supporting cast to chirp in with their random little funny one-liners to remind me that they're in the room. Like I need them to just be quiet and let the adults talk right now.
Yeah. It has to be used sparingly, and I think it was used for at least solidly 50% of the book. Like the first half was all that all the time, and you just can't. It's too much. Yeah, I think it's a great skill to be able to throw in that kind of dialogue, but it can't be the entire thing. So,
Yeah.
yep, agreed. So we have Fox, but then we also have his love interest, a demigod by the name of Brant, Brand. And Brant is son. Brant is the son of Odin, but for a reason that they probably told us at some point, he doesn't have the same powers as the other like creatures that we kind of encounter throughout this book. So his whole kind of personality and bit is that he basically can't tell the truth due to a bet that he made in a game, which we'll get to games later on in the pod. So he speaks in these like very like circular kind of logic and discussions, and he's kind of this like very arrogant character. But yes, he is Fox's love interest, and they have like this whole past and a lot of backstory, as we've we will get to too. That they all have a lot of backstory. Yeah, Brant is fine. I kind of like when we're first introduced to him. He has again the kind of like arrogant, like kind of funny personality that a lot of these characters have, makes them kind of fun for our first introduction, but then I think it fizzles out really quickly for me. So I didn't mind him on first intro. I was kind of intrigued by him, and then I kind of just didn't care again. So he's a little quirky or whatever, but the way that they all are and the way that they kind of feel throughout the entire book. So that's how I feel on Brant personally.
Yeah, agreed. Like he has the same I'm super cocky, I can't be touched, and because of that I have this really dry sense of humor sort of thing that like almost all the characters have going on. And so like I listened to the audiobook. So first of all, I didn't know he had a D in his name, and that I find that very offensive. But regardless,
It is.
I can't believe it. But the only way that I was able to distinguish his lines from like literally anyone else's in the room is because the narrator gave him like a very specific accent. And I think that speaks to like everyone having like this same kind of personality that's like, okay, yeah, I like it, but what else do you have to offer? It's giving kind of like a sitcom where like everyone is from like a different background, and they all sit in the room and they all tell the same kind of jokes, and like their dialogue is like pretty indistinguishable if it wasn't for like the actors being different, obviously. So it's like I don't know. I liked him, but I didn't like him more or less than anyone else because they're all the same. And I feel like he doesn't have like a particularly interesting backstory reveal that makes him stand out. Just he likes Fox, and I know that he likes Fox. I don't know why, but I'm told he loves that boy, and so I'm like, okay, Slay King, like, pop off.
Sitcom is such a good way to put it. And oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Abby.
Oh, I was just gonna say sitcom's a great way to put it for all these characters. Like, this also reminded me of very, very different, but Christmas movies, the Santa Claus movies.
Yeah.
Okay, you have all these like the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny and Santa that are in the room, and it's a kids, obviously a kids movie, but like they have funny little banter, blah blah. But this is like the adult version of that, and it strings on forever, and they're indistinguishable. And it's like it has opportunity to be this fun little concept of like, oh, and it's playing on different tropes of these characters and stuff, which again could be very fun. But the way it's done is they all just sound the same. So I was just gonna say sitcom, I think, is a great way to put that.
I agree, and I hadn't like really put that together like as far as I got, but because I got to chapter like 7 or 8. But now that you guys are talking about all the characters being the same, like, I 100% agree. And it's like they all have these little, like, comebacks. And it's any character could have said, like, these comebacks, basically. They'll be arguing and they'll say something and it's very feisty. Like, I wish I could explain it better than that. But I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting writing style for sure. But very sitcom-y. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can agree.
And maybe it's done on purpose because like most of the characters are immortals, and to be fair, like that's kind of, if you think of like your typical immortal kind of personality, like of course they're cocky, like they can't die, they have powers, like whatever. So benefit of the doubt there, maybe it's on purpose, but again, like the reader experience, I was kind of yearning for, like, especially in the situations where you have like everyone in the room, some push and pull, and like more of that variation of like opinions and backstories and motivations and like pet peeves and like that kind of thing. Like I think that kind of environment would be a great way to show those things, but instead, like, it was really just like 7 of the same voice talking at the same time. So,
well, and we really liked Phantasma. If you haven't, check out the episode or check out the book. It's so good. Little plug. But something to there are, not really a big spoiler, there are demons and things in that book, and something that I think it makes it fun but also really good is that there's certain tropes they play upon, I think, for like what you expect for a demon, or certain things based on like the deadly sins. And so there's certain expectations you have, but I feel like each of those like demons has like their own distinct personality. They have different motivations. Like there's a way to play on tropes and stuff that still make them very distinctive, and you can tell their motivations, you can tell their personality. Like, so that's just one that we read recently where I think it has that kind of similar potential for just like a lot of overlap of like, oh, all these particular types of creatures acting the same way, but they don't. They have their own little personalities. I think this just kind of doesn't do that the way that it wants to,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think really the character that kind of breaks from that mold the most is Vi, who is basically our other kind of, I don't know about main character, but central character, I'll say. The story revolves around Vi and Fox and kind of like their individual plot lines. So Vi is a recently turned vampire gworlie. She works in real estate, which is funny. So I love that part of like realistically what would creatures be doing like in this modern world. She's trying to sell a haunted mansion that the ghost, who we'll talk about in a little bit, does not consent to the mansion being sold. So like you have these funny, again, very sitcom-y kind of moments where she's showing the house and he's kind of like soiling it and turning on and off the lights and whatever. But yeah, she's genuinely the most normal character in the book. She's not unlikable. She doesn't do anything crazy. Her decisions are pretty sound. She's generally pretty moral. Like she has like, her like horrible backstory is that like just after she'd been turned, she was hanging out with her professor, I guess, and she ate his heart and killed him. And so this is like her horrific, guilty, awful thing that she's like working through. And it's kind of like, girl, I get it. You was hungry. I get it. Ain't no thing.
You're stressed.
Yeah, she was stressed. So yeah, she for me, I mean, here's the thing. I like her more than I probably should because it was nice in the sea of unlikable characters to have someone that I could kind of hold on to and be like, okay, thank goodness. Because I think, generally speaking, she's pretty boring. I'm so sorry, Vi. I'm so sorry. But generally speaking, she's like pretty boring. She's not even a very active participant when the plot starts to get going, like, 70% of the way through the book. She's just kind of like there passively. So I don't know what it says about her, but her most likable trait is that she's simply likable in a sea of unlikable people. And so that's really her redeeming quality.
And I think something else, because I feel the same exact way. She was probably my favorite out of them. And one other thing I do like about her, and a fun little arc that I think would have been great to follow in a book that wasn't bogged down with so many different paths and then a final build up to plot. A fun arc to follow would be the whole thing about like, she's basically learning how to be a vampire. She's learning how to like what other creatures exist and what they do. And there's this kind of like fun moment where we get introduced to this other character, Isis, which I'm not even going to get into because there's so many different threads in this book. But I can't. But basically, Isis and Vi like talk a lot about what it's like to be a creature and what other creatures exist, and they call themselves creatures. That's why I say that. But I think her story actually, like, if the book, if this was a whole different book, and there was like a little haunted house with a ghost.
Take Fox and Death out of it. That alone.
Yeah, take the Masters of Death out of the death out of Masters of Death, and then But yeah, I think she had a fun character arc, and the kind of humor and stuff that's used for her story reminds me a lot of, and I mentioned him in the month of Halloween because I'm sure there are some fans of Grady Hendrix out there, but I really like his stuff because it blends like horror and humor really well, and I feel like this is a great example of the opportunity for little bits of horror and humor, if it wasn't also a million other things that happen in this book. So all that to say, yeah,
I do feel like if this had been a different book, I would have liked it. So
that's right. On God, preach.
That's true.
Isn't that a wild thing to say about a book? If this were a different book,
simply.
Olivia, just mean that there's so many there are good threads here. I think they belong in separate projects. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
let me not. Let
her not.
I will cease to be roasting.
Yes. Okay, so Vi's trying to sell this haunted mansion. Okay, and you may ask, who's haunting it? It's Tom Parker IV, everyone. He's her love interest. So he's basically this like super the Kaylee's face right now because she didn't get far enough in the book for this. I know, Kaylee. Hang tight, baby girl.
You're lying.
I'm not. And I'm also not lying when I tell you this was the best romantic plot line in the book.
It's true.
I thought you made a mistake when you say that.
No.
Okay.
No, baby girl.
Oh.
So he's a ghost, obviously haunting this mansion. He was a super rich mortal. Again, he's funny and cocky and arrogant, blah, 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 blah. All the things about Fox and Brant, all the characters are like this, okay? So from Vi's perspective, she thinks that he is ruining the sales of the mansion because he cares about the mansion. But we know as the reader, because we are also in Tom's head, we're in everyone's head, by the way. That's how this book goes. You're in everyone's head. And not even like chapter to chapter, like paragraph to paragraph, okay? You're flipping around in people's heads. So just note that. But we know that Tom is actually doing it because he just wants to spend more time with Vi. And he doesn't even necessarily accept this, but we know this to be true. I hold these truths to be evident. So he also has this, I guess it's a bit. I didn't know it was a bit, but he has this bit where he pretends to be Republican around Vi, and like this is the like intro that we get to him, is him like calling her like a liberal or something, and like again it just starts right off the bat. I'm like, I have an ick, like I don't like this, just as like a foundational thing for a character. But we find out it's a bit at the very end of the book randomly. I think it's Raphael and Gabriel, and again, side characters, don't even but they're like, yeah, he's not a Republican, and he's like, oh, I've been outed. It's true. I'm actually progressive. It's very weird. Okay? It's just very weird. So I thought that was weird. Just in general. I don't know.
It's bizarre. And again, for all of these characters, like, I get what we're going for here.
Yeah.
In that, like, each of the creatures, because the other thing too, I think about, like, with ghosts and vampires and demons, they've been around forever, right? Like, a lot of them have been around for a long time. There's a lot of like little pop culture references or like little things like that. And I get that they're like, that would be funny in another world because Tom's whole family, so the Parkers are a big part of this too. And again, we don't have time to get into how deep that goes, but I don't even want to. But he is a rich person who died in his family's home, who are all rich people, right? So like he's big money. Okay.
He's old money.
So like some of these little jokes, so he's old money. He's old money. He's big money. And so some of these little jokes would be funny again if the book wasn't just so much. It's really hard to follow when there's so much of those little like quips and stuff. Like you have to save those cards, I think. Like there are funny jokes to play for sure, but they're just kind of overdone. And that also applies to him. But I do agree though that like I liked him and Vi's dynamic the most out of any of the other like romance things going on. I think there's opportunity for it to be very like weird but also funny for like a vampire real estate agent to have a house that's haunted by a ghost and for them to have like a little thing. Like that is a weird little funny, if you go the humor route, that's like has a lot of potential there.
That's like a Halloween Hallmark movie that I would watch.
Yes. It's like a little comedy moment too. So like there is funny element to it as well, but it just gets so lost in everything else, and then it gets kind of overwhelming like everything else. But yeah. But he's there.
Yeah, it does work out, Kaylee. It does work out that you see the romance happening, and they do have some cute moments. You know, if you were to make it like about 90% of the way through the book, you really get some cute moments between them.
That is wild.
Yeah.
Because I read their dynamic, I got their dynamic when they were like fun arguing or whatever.
Yeah.
And I did not get a romantic vibe. It was not romantic.
Yeah.
Because like you get those fun bantery couples, and I honestly would have never guessed that that's where that was going. So
that's where that's going.
I thought Fox and Vi were gonna be together. I thought that's where that was going.
I thought so too in the beginning, but
wow,
no, they're friends. They're just pals.
I'm used to it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't tell.
They're
That's the thing to a lot of
allies.
these characters. I'm like, do we like each other? Do we hate each other? I don't know. The ones that do allegedly love each other, I'm like, do you? Like
Yeah.
for
Well,
Fox and Brant, I'm like, do we?
Why?
there's like some commentary in the later parts of the book where it's like, oh, our friends, Vi and Tom and da-da. I'm like, you've known them for literally 4 hours, and for most of those hours, they've annoyed you. Friends is a loose term here. Like, you don't actually, we're not in it together, really. It's just we're all here.
Yeah. We're just forced proximity. Yeah.
Just proximity, yeah. Just the proximity of it all. I will say, and this kind of leads us into our next thing too, but like we've kind of talked about, like there's a bunch of side characters. The funniest thing with Tom, and this isn't even him being funny, but he's needed for the joke, is okay, so Tom is a ghost, and there's only 2 people in the group basically that can see Tom and hear him. Okay. Fox is kind of like leading this whole adventure, and he can't hear Tom, but Tom keeps talking to Fox because Tom can't shut up, because that's the kind of character that he is. And there's a himbo side character named Cal that can hear Tom, and every time Tom says something, he turns to Fox and he says da 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 da, and Fox is like, please, I don't need to hear what he says, because Tom is constantly chiming in on things that he is not relevant to. That bit is the one like recurring bit that I was like, that's funny. I like that.
I agree. And that's why, like, again, there are things that, like, different stylistic things that I like. It's just is too much.
It's so much
in one book. Because, like, in some of the little, like, fighting, like you said, it's almost like they're talking over each other in Discord and stuff. Like, when they do that, that is funny every once in a while in a scene. Like, they're planning something, they have a little bickering thing, and then someone the ghost jumps in, only like 2 people can hear him. It's a funny thing. You can almost like see it play out. It's just you can't do that so often, or at least for, like, I think it kind of dies off the second half of the book, but it is like every scene for like first 50% of the book. You can't do that. It's too much.
It's too much.
Too much.
It's too much.
But I do agree, that little bit is funny. Yeah, and to the point about the supporting characters and stuff too, like, so we've already gone over like 4 of the kind of central characters, and then there's like a good handful of other people that come up, and so that's why it's just a lot too, because they're like supporting characters, but they're involved enough that you like kind of have to keep up with them too. It's a lot of work to follow all of them, and you kind of have to. So
you get their backstories.
It's not like they're,
and like, again, the point. Sorry, Abby, but like the point of it being good. Realistic, right? Because each of our 2 central characters have like, I don't know, 5 characters roughly that are there to like support them and their friends, and like that's realistic. But God, does it make for a messy scene. Like, it's just, again, yes, that is how it is in real life. Like, if I had to pick, the closest people to me to go on this adventure, yes, it would be a lot of people. But, like, in a book, it's like, damn, girl, just pick your bestie and, like, let's head out. Because, like, you got too many people around you.
Yeah. And someone has to be the leader. Like, eventually you have the little blah, blah, blah. And then eventually we have to focus and move on. And then we can have these little bickering moments. Or like, again, pulling in another like example, because these are all pulling from like different fantasy tropes and stuff, right? Like you have even things like Shrek, right? Okay, I'm using Shrek. Because Shrek,
Okay.
Shrek, follow me. Shrek, you have Shrek, you have Donkey.
That's
Donkey. You have Prince Charming and Fiona.
That's right.
You have main thing happening. You have a central plot. You have your central characters you follow. And then you only have a million other little references and funny little quips from other little characters. They are not central to the story. You don't really have to follow them. They're just making little jokes. Like if we had a werewolf come in and say something about being a werewolf, or like, there's a lot of opportunity to like build up this world and have all these funny little quips from characters without you needing to follow them. But there's so much like backstory and stuff from all the supporting characters that you kind of like have to follow them too, and it's too much. Like, you can build that world and not make it crazy. But
yeah, I think this is, and we've talked about this before, but this is the difference, I think, between knowledge that the author has to have and knowledge that the reader has to have. Yes. The author should know Isis's backstory. She should know Cal's backstory. She should know how the one angel girl got to be. You know, like, these are things that she should know, so that can inform their actions and their dialogue. But, like, the reader does not need to be inundated with all of this information in a fully written out backstory. Like, it can be a 1-2 line reference, and, like, we can keep it moving, baby girl, because this is about Fox and Vi, and, like, I gotta get going. I got somewhere to be.
Or you, like, lay the groundwork for it to come up maybe in future books if you have supporting cast that you still want to keep around. But, like, yeah, like, just little bits here and there. No, that's a great point, and I think that that's kind of how I feel about most of the supporting cast. They have little shining moments. They have certain bits of dialogue and stuff that are really great, but I was just overwhelmed because I felt like I had to follow all of them, and there's too much happening in the book to do that, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah, we have our one likable side character. I think this is the most likable character in the whole book, dare I say, is actually Death. It is simply Death, the character. Kaylee is shaking her head no. Girl, you got to chapter 7. Don't at me, bro.
He was so unlikable.
No, I think he's likable.
He's the narrator.
He is the narrator. He is a pompous narrator. He is a pompous narrator. However, he has some, like, funny moments where he's like this reluctant dad figure of, like, going along with, like, his son's silly little things. Like, there's this whole bit, you know, again, let me see, shuffling maybe 80% into the book, where Fox has this thing where he's trying not to curse, and every time he curses, he snaps a rubber band on his wrist, and he makes Death do it, and Death does it when Fox isn't there. And so there are some really cute little, like, humanizing moments. Death is more moral than Fox somehow. Like, he's like, Fox, you can't take advantage of, like, clients like this. You know, there's things like this that I'm like, dare I say, Death might be the most likable moral side character, at least in the book, and maybe the most likable character, period.
And he lives in this
because okay, if I remember correctly, maybe I'm mixing up Fox and Death, but Death as the narrator was, like, hypersexual and, like, would make these weird, like, sexual jokes. Or was that Fox? Because that's how I remember the narrator being early in the book.
I think that was Fox. Like, we really only get, like, an eye perspective from Death in the beginning, where he kind of tells you, like, this is about Fox and he's a little shit, whatever, don't be his friend. And then you're kind of in Fox's head from that point forward, and then he gives, like, an outro. But I don't remember specifically that, but Fox is definitely, like, a pervert, so that makes me feel like it's
Fox.
That's
definitely
what I was thinking Death was. Okay, so
and I think Death,
that makes sense
as well. And I think that's a fair mix up, though, because that scene in the beginning where we first get introduced to Fox, and he ends up, like, seducing the widow that he's trying to be, like, being the medium talking to her husband, which is, like, obviously very immoral and messed up and scammy. Death is still, like, there leading up to that, and I think he's also just kind of, like, witnessing Fox, like, try to scam this woman, and so he's kind of, we get a little bit of his POV on that too, of him being like, seriously,
like,
but I think it's Fox.
This is gross.
Yeah, Fox is ultimately the one who, like, does that and is kind of just immoral and sometimes pervy, but that's a fair mix-up because they are both in that scene.
Makes sense.
But Death is a scammer, and, like, he does make deals specifically with people that he knows will make them suffer later on purpose. So, like, he's not don't get me wrong, he's not a good guy. But
that's expected, though,
gray, you know.
Yeah, like, that's
who
Death.
Represents Death. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, of course he's gonna make, like, a classic, like, devil deal, you know, but yeah, I don't know.
Well, and even, like, again, I think of the book is where it has those tropes and kind of plays on it. So some of it is like expected behavior, like that he's not. I mean, it's death. He's probably gonna not be the best, but it has like certain little shining moments, or like one of the side character dynamics that I did think was funny was and I think you did too, Maddie, was Raphael and like Gabriel, who are these angels who like kind of have to come kind of recruit people for handling like this whole game situation and stuff, and like angels being messengers, right? Like that kind of trope works really well for this because they kind of like kiki a little bit together too, and yeah, so like it's funny, just a lot going on.
Yeah, they grew on
So.
me. Their shtick was like they're basically like lawyers, essentially, of like the afterlife, and so that was kind of their shtick. And they also kind of enable each other. So like they, for example, one scene they like were trying to tell Fox like this whole situation that's going on, and they didn't tell him anything. And then they ended up being like, we need to do this to save the world. And he was like, well, you didn't say that. And Gabriel's like, I'm pretty sure I did say that. Like, I told you this, 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 and this, and this. And Raphael is like, he's just immortal. He probably missed it. And like, but they absolutely didn't say it. And so it's like that kind of like funny bit that I'm like, okay, this is funny. Like, they're enabling each other. They're lawyers. Like, okay, this is acceptable. But it took a minute for them to grow on me. I won't lie. I found them rather annoying in the beginning. But it is what it is.
That's a common theme in this book. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right, guys. All right. We've made it to the plot. What are we, 80% through the pod? It's just like the book, baby girl. We've made it to the plot. Okay.
Literally.
So,
how it works.
The whole premise of the plot is that there is a game that the Immortals play. It's referred to basically as the game or the Immortals game. And the thought is that immortals, since they can't die, they get bored and they need to wager other stuff, like literally their ability to tell a truth or certain time that they spend in a certain place, or being able to see their lover, like whatever, just like weird, random, whatever's most important to them, they can wager that thing and it makes them feel something. Anything, because immortal life is so boring. So basically death kind of like runs the game, and the rule of the game is that death always wins. Death can't lose. So the only way that you win the game is if you and death win. Okay, and winning it's not like, chess, where it's a simple black and white, you won, you lost. Winning is basically like self-interpreted. So if you feel like you won and you can make the other person feel like they lost, you won, even if you lied. Like, even if you told them a lie or you deceived them in some way. So it's very emotions-based. It's very... I don't know, nothing fucking matters, basically. Like, it's just all vibes based. So, this random demon who we, again, won't even get into because, like, it literally doesn't even fucking matter. He kidnaps Death, and he decides that he wants to, like, take over the game and the world and all of it. And he forces Death into this, like, one big final game, and Fox is chosen to be his opponent that has to like defeat him in this one big final game. Okay.
You're doing great.
I'm following, yeah, and I didn't even read it.
So
yeah, I'm following better now than I did in the book. Swear.
On God. Most of the book is spent being incredibly secretive about how the game worked, and like intentionally so. Like, the characters have no idea what they're getting into, which for me was a very frustrating experience as a reader. I was so over it by the time we actually got to the game, which again is just so far into the book. Like, you have no idea what to expect. And then for me, the gameplay, again, it's very emotion based. So it's basically like, okay, if me and Kaylee were going against each other, it would be me showing like memories to Kaylee that I think will basically like hurt her or like expose her weaknesses until she gets to the point where she either can show me something that breaks me down more, or she just breaks down and then she loses. So it would be like if you showed me like my dog being decapitated, and then I would kind of have to either lose the game or be like, I didn't care about that dog anyway, and you would have to believe me that I didn't actually care about the dog for me to win. So
Very toxic.
very toxic, very like you're not probably friends after this experience.
No.
But I found the gameplay to be rather underwhelming, and I know that might be toxic because like I am a character girly, but I'm like, oh my god, can we have like a trial where we're like jumping across like a cavern or something, like some action. I thought we were finally gonna get some action, but it's literally just like people sitting across from like a Beyblade rink to each other and being like, have you considered that your partner never loved you? And then you have to be like, I don't even love them. And and then like the angels are like, Fox has won the round. And you're like, okay, fine.
That is literally it. Like, I think too is that maybe I would have felt differently if the game had come, I don't know, 100 pages sooner. I was just dying because I think we spent so much time building up the characters and their little dynamics because that was supposed to make us like feel really strongly if they like lost the game, or like make us feel these big reveals when their like weaknesses are displayed in the game and stuff. And instead I was just so kind of worn out by the time we got here that then I was just kind of underwhelmed. I was like, okay, I don't really know if I care if X character loses this game or if Y character wins. I don't really care. I'm just kind of tired now. Just kind of wanted to end. So it's just the payoff
so
was
unclear.
not the payoff was not there for me when we finally got this like supposedly hot plot heavy moment, you know.
The stakes were also unclear. Like I wasn't really sure what was going to happen when someone lost because we weren't really like you don't really like I don't know. I guess you don't wager until you get to the end because like I don't know, like Tom had to play, but like I don't know what he wagered. Like there was no discussion of like what was going to happen. Like it's all just very strange. And then some of like the win-loss negotiations happen like while they're in the round and they're like, what would you like to lose? And it's like, what is going on here? Like I don't know. I feel like the stakes weren't clear. The like game structure wasn't clear. I feel like Tom just played like to have him play in a scene and to do a reveal where it was like he says he doesn't love Vi and like now they have kind of like beef that doesn't really matter. Like I don't know. Kaylee, do you have FOMO? I see it on your face. You definitely have FOMO that you didn't experience this firsthand.
Aren't you missing out, Kaylee? You didn't want to get 200 pages deeper?
Literally.
This sounds kind of interesting. This part sounds kind of interesting, I'm not going to lie. Or at least Maddie's making it sound kind of interesting. I find it interesting that for a book that over-explains everything, they didn't explain this well enough, it sounds like. So
On God.
I wonder if that was a choice or if that was like...
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
It's a great way to put it. Yep.
Well, because I think the reason why the game is vague, well, one, I think to play into the whole like death and fate and time tropes and stuff. Like there's literally a character named Time that I don't think we run into, but there's like references to. So I think it's meant to be vague intentionally to kind of like, because you're playing with things like fate and these like really big concepts. So I think that makes sense why the way they talk about it is very vague. But like once we're actually in the game, I wanted more like, I wanted to know what was at stake. You know what I'm saying? Like I wanted to have, but no, I thought this was kind of cool. It just, I was so bogged down by the time I got there that I think I was just tired. Like I couldn't really fully get into it. You know?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Abby, is like, bear in mind that everything that happens is wrapped in about like 8 layers of philosophical thought.
Mm-hmm.
So the way it's being explained is also being explained to you like, if you really think about fortune, the thing is, like, everyone can have fortune and mortals and blah, blah. And then, but then if you think about fortune backwards, then it's like, if, or to fortune, and then that's what that means. And then, but then, 200 years, and it's also like, I don't know. It's so wrapped in like trying to make me think deeper about things that I'm like, okay, can you just say it fucking plain? Like, what are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
What are we betting? Like, this author, she's a deep thinker, and I love that for her. I, admittedly, a flaw. I hate philosophy. I hate thinking about shit that does not matter. I hate shit that can't be proven. I don't care. And so, like, she has these like moments where she talks about like the type of knocks that you can expect on the door, and this is the delivery person's knock, and this is the knock of someone who is knocking but they don't want to come in, and this is the knock of the person that is knocking and they really want to come in, and like and like all this shit, and I'm like, what are we talking about? And it's the same thing when she's trying to explain the game to me. She's like, but the people that want to play the game and the people that don't want to play the game, and then the death and the loss and the da-da-da. Huh. I don't know. I'm stupid.
Yeah.
I don't like to engage at that level.
No, my brain, and I think that there are stories that can do that well. And again, I'm going to mention again, in honor of spooky season, Grady Hendrix. Horror and humor are two hard things. And like, for example, his most recent book is called How to Sell a Haunted House, which is very reminiscent of part of this plot with Vi and Tom. But it's funny, it is actually spooky, and it is like talking about loss because it's referring to the house being haunted by like past family members and stuff like that. So it somehow manages to like hit the nail on the head for very different feelings and emotions. But I think it knows like what it is leading with. Like it knows that it is really like a horror book first, I think. Maybe closely followed by humor, and then third with some of that more like introspective kind of like stuff. I think the struggle with this one is that there's just a really strong humor component, maybe sometimes too strong, a potentially strong fantasy component, and then this like very philosophical component. And I think that there's not enough balance with them, so it just overwhelms. Whereas like you can mesh genres for sure. I just think that this one puts too much at the same time, and I think that's why it's kind of tough. Because like this is a moment where like the fantasy plot side of things could have really taken over and been really cool, but we were so bogged down by all the dialogue heavy shit and humor building up to it that it didn't really feel as serious, or it felt too philosophical in the aftermath, and it just the balance wasn't there. Like you can do it well, it just I didn't feel like it was that balanced personally. I was just kind of overwhelmed. But
yeah, and another person I think does this well is Brandon Sanderson, because even though Tress of the Emerald Sea wasn't my absolute favorite book, I feel like he had that constant humorous tone, but it was a little bit more balanced. The characters were a little bit more balanced, and then when he hit with like some of the philosophical stuff, it had like a much higher success rate for me. And I have like such a low stomach for philosophy stuff, obviously, but like there are still things in that book that I think about that were like those philosophical talking points, because they were done really well. They made sense in context of the characters and like what they were going through, and like they weren't just basic, I don't know, like thoughts that are just like filling space. So yeah, it definitely can be done. This just was too much for me.
Agreed. So we have the game, and then we finally get to the ending, essentially. So in the end, Fox beats the demon of vice, so the one who's like setting up this final game, through some cleverness, and he ends up facing the final boss. So he faces Death. Death admits that he loves Fox, which to Death is a weakness, I think, to admit. So he loses the game. But Fox, in turn, realizes that emotions, feeling, mortality, etc., are not weakness, and he admits that he loves Death, and thus he wins the game because he admits that those things are weakness.
To him,
and the games are
good.
It's good.
To him, good. To Death, bad. Same thing, different result.
Yeah. He's allowed to. He is a man. Men are allowed to feel, and he realizes that, and for that, he wins. And everyone is happy again, and it's all tied up in a pretty bow, and yeah,
that's it.
That's it. We got this far to realize that it's okay to have feelings and to love. You know, like the one point that I actually did like, the little philosophical point that I thought was it was just like a nice little concept, was that because he, I think, kind of gives up some of his, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Maddie, because I did at this point I was kind of overwhelmed, but he kind of gives up some of his immortality, right? Like, to, you remember this? Right?
Yeah, he basically, well, like, he kind of shirks it. So, like, he says he doesn't want immortality. We're at the point where, like, he gets to choose what he wants to win, because Death knows that he's gonna lose, that Death will lose and that Fox will win, and Death is like, you want immortality? And he's like, it's not all like it's cracked up to be, honestly. I'm kind of chill, like, I don't want it. And is that what you're talking about, where he basically is like, nah?
Yes. He's not as interested in immortality, and I think to be honest, but I think the idea there is that he's like more focused on the love of it all, and like wants to enjoy the life that he has ahead of him, like the one mortal life, and get all the emotions and feelings out of that, I think, is what it's kind of getting at. And so, like, immortality is not the goal. The goal is to, like, live a life with love and ups and downs, and you know, I think that's like meant to be the live, laugh, love of it all, but which is kind of nice, but it just took a long time for me to get there. You know?
It is,
it's
but
giving, like, Midnight Library.
Yes, which I fucking hated that book. Sorry to everyone.
I know you hate that book. I actually liked that book.
Yep. I've wanted to gouge my eyes out so hard in that book. Oh my god. Whatever, it's fine. I'm triggered now. The thing is, Abby, like, that was nice, but I couldn't take him seriously because he is like an immortal mortal. This motherfucker is the godson of death, so death never comes for him. So he's just like 28 or whatever, and he's already like 300 years old, 300 years old. So I'm like, yeah, it's easy for you to be like, I don't want immortality, because you already have it. Like, you have this loophole that you're not acknowledging, and like, why is no one talking about this? Like, he's just staying young forever. Like, I don't understand. Like, I get that he could probably be like, hey, Death, like, I'm ready to head out now. But, like, it doesn't matter. The revelation doesn't matter, because he already gets to choose not to die as long as he doesn't, like, run out in front of a car.
Okay, Nepo baby. He's like, he's literally the godson of death. He knows that he never really has to worry about it. Like,
literally,
he doesn't understand the struggle. Okay. Yeah. No, again, like, I knew where we were going, and then we got there, and I was kind of like, she's not hitting for me. I'm not doing it for me. I'm sorry.
It's not. And also, I still didn't care about Fox by the end of it. So I just doubly, I blacked out so hard when he was on his little monologue about, like, oh, and then Fox realized that, like, feelings were good and blah, 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 blah. I like the general concept that drives home the point that the game is so individualized that, like, Death and Fox did the same thing and had different results in the game. Okay, I liked that. I thought it was cute that Death was like, I love you. You know, it was cute. But it didn't it didn't hit my daddy issues as much as it meant to, I think.
And that's why we didn't like it.
I just was like, okay, whatever.
Look at our history, our reading history, and that'll tell you everything you need to know.
That's right.
We're bringing back Vincent.
I knew that's where this was going.
He's just no Vincent. I'm sorry. He's no Vincent. Get out of here, Kaylee.
If you haven't read Serpent and Wings of Night,
please do.
This is your shout out to do.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
Anyway,
well,
okay.
The plot.
That was the whole book, guys. That's it. That's really it. So now it's time for everyone's favorite part of the pod, our hot takes and our pour overs. So I will start. This will be no surprise to anyone, but we don't need a fully written backstory for everything. Please stop. Stop. I don't care. And I think it was really difficult for me. And maybe this is because I read the audiobook, and they didn't say like chapter da 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 as like a break. So I don't know if this is how it was in the actual book, but like there was no sectioning between the present and the past, and it was a very, very confusing experience for me to be like, okay, Brant and Fox seem to know each other, and then instantly the next line they're like, who are you? I'm like, what is going on here? And then it takes a minute to realize like, oh, we're back in the past. Like it just was like really disorienting, and I didn't care. I just would have rather have discovered most of that information through conversations in the present, which is what the other characters were doing anyway. So we'd have this fully written backstory, and then we would go back to the present, and then you would have Vi being like, how do y'all know each other? And then they would be like, we used to fuck. And it's like, okay, so I actually didn't need that whole backstory because there's a medium for me to find out the information that I need to know in the story. Release me. Free me from this hell, please.
You're so right. Also, side note, I had the audiobook, but I also read the paperback, and I did mostly paperback. So I didn't realize that the audiobook didn't have because it literally will say interlude, and it has like a name for the interlude before it goes back for the time jumps and stuff. And there's certain ones in the book that are visually set up like almost like a script. There are a few scenes like that.
I figured that out. Way too far into the book.
I was about to say, there are definitely I was like, yeah, there's definitely some big visual things like in the book that I would imagine would impact the audiobook listening if they don't handle it right. So,
and see, this is an interesting whole separate topic that goes back to, again, like audiobooks versus physical books discussion, because this is another thing that the writing style can greatly impact the experience that the audiobook listener has if it's not written with that in mind. And I think that was part of your struggle too, Kaylee, is the audiobook. And the narrator was kind of weird.
The narrator gave me the ick. That's why I stopped reading this book.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, dude. It's not you. It's the way you were talking.
It's not you. It's the characters.
Am I wrong, though? It was like the way he would voice the women especially.
I did not like his girl voice. I didn't like his
American
accent.
It was so bad. It was so bad.
Yeah. I didn't like that. Anyways. That's
Yeah.
my hot take. My pour over, I literally have no thoughts left to think because the book thought them for me. I really feel like there was no room for the reader in this book to exist, to have an independent thought, to make a connection that wasn't immediately then either presented or corrected. So I have no pour over. I've been given everything that I ever need and more about every aspect of this book, and I will probably never think about it again. That's my piece.
Sorry, I'm laughing. Okay. Yep. Felt. My hot take. Let's see. I love the girls now. I'm here for dark academia. I love literary fiction sometimes. Okay, I'm here for it. It's a genre I enjoy. I also think you can cross genres. I've talked about it. Grady Hendrix, check him out. Horror and humor. He's really great at that. But like I said, there's just like way too much going on all at once. You got to decide which foot you're trying to lead with. And I was never sure if I was supposed to be laughing, thinking, enjoying fantasy. Like you don't have to spoon feed stuff to me, but you also can't like put everything there. I need a little bit more guidance. So I just didn't really know like what tone you were trying to strike with this book. That made it kind of hard, even though I thought there were certain threads that were really fun. So, and then pour over. I feel the way you feel, Maddie. So I don't know that I really want to spend more brain energy here. However, if I were going to, I think because there are little threads that are kind of fun, If there's a story on like Tom and Vi, and I could see that being
A
its
prequel.
own book, or like a fantasy. Yeah, exactly. Or like a fantasy that's about this game, and it's just more focused on the game, and just down the cast of characters to like remain, and then maybe some, like I think there's different ways you could spin this story and take these little threads, and I'd still be interested in it because there are fun characters. But yeah, other than that, I'm good off that. I spent a lot of time with this one, so
I'm good off that.
I'm good off that.
Well, do you have anything you want to get off your chest about this, Kaylee?
Yeah, I'd like to say that I think this book was a first draft, and I think it should have stayed in first draft.
Nah, it should have stayed in the drafts. That's crazy.
I'm sorry. I don't. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say. Maybe it was the audiobook.
Enough
I'm
said.
going to blame the audiobook. But that's all I got to say. Okay. And I don't have a forever. Obviously.
Obsessed. She said, I said what I needed to say.
I love this, Kaylee.
My truth.
I said it.
You know what? She's right.
She's right.
Okay, ratings and fave parts. I will give this book. I can't rate it because I didn't finish it. I read very little of it, but I gave it a 2 on Goodreads. I gave it a 2, and then I explained that I DNF'd it.
That's very generous.
That is very
generous.
Okay, generous queen.
I felt the way about this book that I felt about the movie, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or whatever. I felt like it was very British humor, but I know she's not. I know Olivia Blake is not British because I looked it up, so I was surprised to find that out.
Kaylee said, "I smell a Brit."
That's the vibe I was getting. But
no, that's fair. That
you know
is
what
super,
I mean? The humor was
super
very
dry,
British.
slow. I hate. Let me not say that.
Get
British
roasted. It said British humor without the British. British humor minus the British.
Bro was meant to be born in London.
Facts.
Retweet.
I don't.
Okay.
So you guys go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. My rating, I gave it 2.5 out of 5, which it sounds really harsh, but listen, it just really wasn't for me. Like, I can see why this specific audience is looking for this type of writing. I really think I agree with Abby. Like, there were some really redeemable pieces, but they were so drowned in everything else and all the other noise. There were so many sections that I wanted to skip. Like, I just was dying to be like, do I need this? It's just really not for me. Like, I never want to read another book by this precious author. May she rest in peace. I hope her career soars. But, like, it's just so not for me. I can't do it. I respect it. I can't do it. My favorite part was the reveal of Brant not being able to give Fox any truths. So that's why he talks so circuitously and why he's, like, never able to tell Fox directly that he loves him. I thought that was actually, it was pretty emotional. It was pretty well done. If I had cared a little bit more about the characters, it would have hit harder. But, like, I really respected that kind of, like, twist because I didn't see that coming. So I was like, oh, okay. Slay Queen. Yeah, that's my thoughts.
I'm cracking up watching Kaylee's reaction to that, though. She's, like, sitting with it, like, okay.
T.
Okay, rating. I said maybe a 3.
See, you're the same place as me, where you're like, it wasn't that bad, but it kind of was.
I cannot. You guys are lying. You guys are just giving it too high of a rating. Because I've listened to everything.
What do you mean?
I've listened to everything you guys have said. Abby literally said if this was a different book, I would have liked it. And then you guys were both talking about how, like, if this had been written hugely differently, if this had been a different story, I would have liked it. And then you still give it a 3, Abby? I'm like, that does not something not adding up there. I'm
Hey.
sorry. I'm just gonna say.
So you're right. Every time we do ratings, side note, I struggle because I'm like, am I giving my personal feels
Yeah.
or am I giving like how I think it ranks as like from a more critical perspective? It's just me taking the prompt too literally. It's not that deep. I shouldn't be taking that deep. You know what? You're right. This was like a 2 for me on a personal scale.
I think that's fair. Because I always get in my head too, Abby. I'm like, it is technically written well. Like, the characters are well thought out. I'm like, there was thought. Like, I've just read such.
Okay, babe. It's the neurodivergence. We don't know how to take a prompt. It's all right. I don't know how to not take shit too literally.
Kaylee was right to call us out.
Me,
Please, gun to my head. It's a 2. It's a 2. I swear.
Probably more like a 2. I've read worse things. I've read God Killer. It's fine. Yeah, it's not for me. That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
My favorite part, probably when I liked Vi's her little threads a lot. When she's first discovering kind of what it is to be a vampire, and they like give her this like juice box the first time. Like it's kind of funny, you know. It's the little build up for her is kind of funny. Her little backstory is kind of funny. So yeah, I liked her character. That's why I think that would be a fun character to follow.
Please.
We didn't have 500 other characters, so please.
Sweet.
But yeah, that's it for me.
All right. If everyone has said their piece, that is all the tea that we have on Masters of Death. We are finally free. Our spirits have ascended beyond this book. Next time, because we just need a guaranteed win, we are throwing it back to a real classic, and we're going to be reading The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I'm biased because this is genuinely one of my favorites. I'm really excited to revisit it. I'm excited to see what y'all think about it, especially Abby. This is her like first real delve into the universe. So I'm excited for Abby to meet Carden. I can't wait. Although he is kind of a brat in book 1, so disclaimer.
Retweet.
Real enemies to lovers incoming. Okay, and then you can stay up to date with us and the latest tea on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube by following us at Spill the Novel Tea on all of the things. And while you're there, let us know your hot take. Was this written for you? Are you the reader that this book was meant for? Because we're sorry for the things that we said, but also this is a safe space, so I'm not really that sorry. But like, if you like it, I love it for you.
Spare us a brain cellar too, because maybe that's just what I was missing here. So
that's right. Maybe write me just like a synopsis of the next one, and I'll just read the synopsis, and then we can.
There's another one.
Shout out to the people. Side note: whoever read the synopsis online that I found, shout out.
No way! You could have told me that we were synopsising, and I could have saved so many brain cells, bro. I was listening on like 2 times speed.
We'll take this offline, okay?
Cursed, yeah. Meet me in the DMs, Abby. Anyways, we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.